Tetani Tomba Tomba to Tenjo to Chiton Rotter, Nakoa, Leopard, Snola, Tetani members, Tendri member, Shita, Yellow, Tendri members, Tomba to Tenjo, cigarettes at the Carreras, Dedichil Koa Lena, non chundros, Carreras, Tetani member, Shita, Rongi, Yellow, no, churches. She Churti Shiva na Mapper Ninja Dinitons, Shita Dong, Gumdra, Galaga, Tangomdra, Tibetan, Jenny Logo Shina, Jutta, Yalato Susu Pashu, Nani Koro Lapak Pashu, and Jutta, Mapper and whatever Koro on it. Traumato to Junior said June Dibiti Shita Trabatinies, La Tomba Tenjo to Tenjo, Chito Chito, Cote, Dana, Lil Hashu, there's no Monteba, so then there Tomba Tenjo, Toto Tenjo, Tombito, Dushi had the Dishan to Lil Haboras. The Tomba the Juni Peter Chito Chilando, the some Mares or some 200 Gomba Shiron. Oh, yeah.
Instead of understanding the emptiness of the self-sustaining entity, emptiness and dependent origination to mean the same or to be mutually informing each other. If it is understood as, say, just dismantling the objects such as box, you dismantle them and the box disappears. So that is emptiness. And then you assemble all the parts once more, and then again the box comes back. This is dependent origination. So there are some people who interpret it like this. This is not the correct. This is the easiest thing, and this does not really connote that understanding of the mutuality of the meaning of emptiness and dependent origination. So the unassembling or dismantling the box, you can do it physically or you can do it mentally, and then when you assemble all the parts of which constitute the box, or mentally or physically, and then the box comes into being. So this is not the understanding of the mutuality of understanding of emptiness and dependent origination. With this, we continue reading in the middle of page 33. Instead, if we were to take the fact of a thing becoming nothing upon the disassembling into its parts on the one hand, and the fact of the thing coming into being upon assembling its parts together, on the other hand, to point to the notion of how emptiness, dependent origination inform each other, then this seems to be too easy to be a correct reading of that statement.
Da che ci sono da carrere roji di traba zembe do tonyo go tigo ne chaldon tamse go stawa da tisen ane sentam ba do roji ba do tsu go sha tsu mare tanja go sha be roji di traba zembe ba teres roji traba zembe ba teres dino ne roji di traba zembe go chaldon sti to carrere ane the Roland said with young Rongini Tabaka, Chaldonki Dokara, on the car Rongini. Da Ronchi Taba, said the Chaldonki to take to roll a share, Maro roll to this as a sharing doing. Ronchi Tau said, what the Bola. Then Candy said, telling Jitichi get you with us. Ti Oma Gombar sono sebo yor Ronchi Taba Seto Sebo Yo Marte Ronchi Jitaba Zenas Tatini Chibara Ronchi Tao se de Cola Solo Tume Ngaro Ronchi Tanke Macho Yena Ronchi Tanke Lomba Tromba Yena Ronchi Tanke Jacob Yena Ronchi Tanke Maro Ronchi Tanke Yes of the trainer Dile ane stoba so jide chide no ko to so jo wo ti ko la tene ya tor no chirin ro treba do marger chirin ro do cha do ane chashi to chirin ro ya tene wo ti yong do ti nyong wi zhong do 다요 메라톤에 지치게노 메라톤에 롱추타 오로 저로 드차레 텐데 저로 츠타마 데니 요 롱추탐바데 제야 되게 슈고 나메라톤 소소 세마 짐조야 아니 설레네 마디와 차도 서 예마디와 차 틀레테네 컨트롤 치거래 예마디티네 테네 컨트롤 치거래 모티티네 Teto Lola Shadow. That's just it on your kitchen shot. Tito Ten Zuki Toga. Santo Carristi. Three Zeto Shaka Tanishivi. Ani Chiri Yoban City or Mary, Yoban's Meban's, Yiban's, Anichusia, Yiban's, Mayimban's, Yoban's, Meban's, Lobon's, Taban's, and then the strip of Momo, and the Solomon Botona, then the Chado, Chiri, Kayo Maso. We have telling Toso Kanga Pakasha, then, and then Chadon Gondor, then Stony Tone, Chadon Mastil Reset. Titet no short to sono, tickle, Pentoshita Yungi or Resido, Karas and Gora, Nodra.
Okay, now what is the most important thing is that the how grasping a true existence gives rise to the emotions, destructive emotions, such as attachment, anger, and so forth. And yes, the grasping at true existence is said to give rise to these destructive emotions. And unlike what is presented by Chittamatra philosophy, likewise Savatantra Madhyamika, their presentation of how the destructive emotions are given, such as attachment, aversion, and so forth, are given rise to by the corresponding destructive, say, the erroneous cognitive views. Unlike this, the Prasanga gives a very subtle understanding of this and how that is done. And this is something which we really need to reflect on and contemplate and to inquire how this erroneous thinking of things to be existing as intrinsically real, or things existing from its own side and giving rise to these destructive emotions, or how we perceive things, or how we grasp at things as a self-sustaining entity, and then this leading to the destructive emotions. What is that mechanism? This is to be explored, and I personally feel that seeing things as self-sustaining entity, while things are empty of self-sustaining entity, yet we see in this erroneously, then the 8 worldly concerns are triggered. And this actually indicated in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Acharya Chandrakirti's text, Madhyamaka Avatar, and that how it works is that when we see the things as self-sustaining entity, including the self, we see ourselves as an entity which is very independent of other factors, be it your family, or your neighbors, or your country, or the self, the I. we see these entities as self-sustaining entity without having to depend on the other factors. So then what happens is that the eight worldly concerns are easily triggered for the reason that when somebody praises you or when you become popular and famous, naturally then the arrogance, attachment arise. And this is what we can experientially feel. And also that when somebody defames you or insults you, the instantly seeing that you as self-sustaining entity, not dependent on other factors, you see as though like everything is within you, self-contained within you, and then you find yourself as very hopeless. Instantly you go deep down into depression, loss of confidence, and so forth. And also uneasiness comes into being, and because of this uneasiness, the unpleasant feeling, naturally the anger arises. So this how this erroneous thinking of the entities to be existing, to be having self-sustaining the quality. So how that gives rise to the eight worldly concerns, and because of which then the attachment aversion, they're easily triggered. This is more the easy to understand and to feel it that way. And whereas we do find people around who talk about all these emotions, destructive emotions, they're triggered by the grasping of the duality, duality of what is permanent, impermanent, what is existent, non-existent, and so forth. When you see the duality, it is the discursiveness of your mind, discursive of your thoughts to all the different objects. Naturally, then the attachment arouse it lead to the arousing attachment and aversion, and then it is this belief that some people say that just don't think of. Stop all your discursive thoughts. Stop all your thoughts. Stop thinking of anything, and naturally anything, so that the seeing things as dualistic, they will all subside. In other words, stop thinking of anything. So once all your thoughts are stopped, and this is you feel the emptiness. So with this experience emptiness, then the attachment, aversion, all these mental agitations will stop. And in fact, in the today, in the modern times, particularly in I heard that in the Western countries, their philosophy is becoming quite popular, where people do find say benefit out of this, particularly it says that the more active your thoughts are, more you end up into mental agitation. So with this, then the people they are just taught to not to think of anything, control your thoughts, and just stop all the thoughts, and the emotions such as attachment, anger, and so forth will subside, and there is very peaceful experience. This is how many people they follow these traditions. But how the attachment, anger, these arise, if you really probe into the true mechanism, then I don't think that this is how it works. For sure, there are benefits, there are temporary benefits there, but to really stop the attachment, anger, these destructive emotions for good, we need to know how the mechanism, the manner in which these destructive emotions, they are given rise to by the cognitive erroneous thought, the grasping at things to be existing as self-sustained entity. And this erroneous cognitive thinking of seeing things as self-sustaining entity, how this gives rise to 8 worldly concerns, and then the attachment, aversion, these destructive emotions are triggered. So this is something which will be helpful. I find it very helpful.
Marathon now just doing Tasol subject, trenching subject Mona, Tenny, Lola, Maldiva, and Drama, Momo Shayo, or trenching subject Yona, Tenichi Gola, Saldo Chito, Tenichi Gola Shivi, or today is Samara, someone do, Rosi Tabaka, Chaldon Resto Carrera, what the region, Tatishiano. Jiti chibji kiwala o tene ta roji ji trabak gatene tene chadon de to kar distrache tos wone te on kon dapo so ron chu taban zamba de jiti ki chuje ile to ba de so ane no ta to she ta so joshi ton no to te 아니 키테 자세 송 심파라 치파라 치슈 첨봉파로 이 준비에 예스교시 아니 강 물바도 예 물바 세 추디 예물디와 아니 젤라드네스톤 아니 젤라 Jidon control son timpar de draw Nyoy Drabis, te so rongela Nyoy Tawle. Oh ya Nyoy Drabis, ya Nyoy Drabis, ane current person draw tribes ni so kunji stawa yellow titter to coins niba koyuchi de go
Continue reading from page 33, last paragraph. Clinging to a notion of self-sustaining selfhood or aggregate generates the 8 worldly concerns, in that when one receives praise and so forth, a sense of self-importance or arrogance or obsessive attachment, etc. seem to grow in oneself to the point of overlooking other beings. Whereas when one is subjected to blame and so forth, one seems to fall deep into a state of disappointment, sadness and depression, and from within the state of mental disturbance and instability, one dwells in frustration and anger towards others. This is something verified by our own experience. And from this, it becomes quite evident how the clinging is at the root of all these faults. Knowing this, it is incumbent on us to make efforts to avoid that with all our ability.
Chapche Mama be down measure so starts here. Chapche Mama be started the kitchen of sugar. Chapche Mama be study gossip. Don't kid or music and the rich so shy yours. Chapche Mama be studying gossip. Kid or music, Tangy message the Germany, ngarong shi chi chomna oti ngarong shi chi chomna se reta kiro mo chi tirse bu so yo ngarong shi chi yona luki chi chile chenon tong storme passant con corona yogo bana la ti ti luki tita mandupis nga ronji ki matro meto nyamton ani gamba yenas shenden marites tati solo yabochi ton navde nga ronji ki trona kon tete yebi chawre ani nolo yobi chashilo yobi chasati chanche yobi chawre te yo kuluko tomo mayima nga ronji ki trona nolo yo to cholo yo to gole yo to kombali yo to non chugre ta kandisa ta gore wa ade shindene marikti.
Continuation from page 34, the second paragraph reads, in refuting such a notion of self-sustainability, the primary form of argument of reasoning used is something known as the reasoning of non-observation of the pervador. So here, what is considered as very important is the reasoning of the four essentials. The four essentials are the essential of the reasoning to establish emptiness by the four essentials, essential of identifying object negation, essential of understanding the emptiness of the objects being intrinsically one with its parts, and the essential of understanding the emptiness of the objects being intrinsically different from its parts, essential of understanding the privation, that anything which is intrinsically being empty of intrinsically being one and different from its parts, entails the emptiness of objective existence of the object. And this reasoning is considered as very important. And the reasoning of non-observation of the pervador. Non-observation of pervador meaning that there is no intrinsic reality, because when you give the reason is given in the form of negation, that it is empty, it is not, object is not intrinsically being intrinsically being one with its parts. So is the rejection, the non-observation of the intrinsic one with its parts, non-observation of the intrinsic different from its parts, and non-observation of the pervador. Pervador here is, for what we are rejecting is the intrinsicality that is to be pervaded. And if something exists as intrinsic, then what should that be like? It should be intrinsic one or intrinsic different, or the object should be intrinsically one with its parts, or it should be intrinsically different from its parts. So intrinsic one with its parts and intrinsically different from its parts, these two are the pervaders, and these two pervade the intrinsic reality. To reject the intrinsic reality, what is pervaded, to reject that, we have to reject the pervader, the intrinsic oneness with its parts and the intrinsic differentness from its parts. So these two are to be rejected. These two are referred to as a pervader, and these two are to be rejected. This is the meaning of the non-observation of the pervader. So, non-observation of the pervaded, emptiness of intrinsic reality, because of the non-observation of the pervader, because of the emptiness of the non-observation of the intrinsic one and intrinsic different. And this is the meaning of the non-observation of the pervader. Okay, to continue reading this, you may ask, how does this work? In his Lamp Dispelling the Darkness, A Guide to the View, Kiddu Gelek Belsang, another of the two chief disciples of Lama Tsongkhapa, writes, if one meditates thinking that I'm empty of intrinsic inherent existence because if I were to exist inherently, I would have to be found either inside or outside the body, or in the upper, lower, or middle part of the body. And since I'm not found in any of these, therefore I must lack inherent existence. This is utterly incorrect. So here, what is important is that if something does exist inherently, because since there is no inherent existence, if something does exist inherently, then you can think of that object to be of anything. You can just imagine anything. But this is not how it works here. That when we say if something exists inherently, then you inquiring how that object, what exactly does mean by something existing as inherently, and the analysis must be done. Properly. That that it should not be look at if the self exists as inherently, and then it should exist in your head, your limbs, and so forth. This is not how it should be done. It should be done to really understand what is meant by inherent existence.
Chito tama koro kansu chupi dembar yona dembe chito tama koro gubi chans. Dembar chana chapsa kara sana dembar chupi chito tama koro chapsa testa gungres. Tini konde yos. Oh yeah, maybe Denver metal, Denver me go by teacher, Chito, Chita Taji, Deme, Nipper Cheba studies, and Trumna Trumna Trotan Taniji Gores, oh yeah, Trotan Data Dato Coron Chita Dato de Coron Chita Trot Gubi Gushi Kanso Chuni, only Kanso Chubash Shiki. Tapat chini chusar titar me titar titata konde me ba nina manina me ba ni ba stigo bar stior Тижи сказать, не ба тижи жить, вот они так ронжите темно, чёрт это ё могу балас, они чёрт ронжите темно это ё могу балас, это ронжите чёрт Ronshiki member Nibert Manila or the Tibetan she songs.
Reading from page 35. And this is because the proper way of analyzing how I should exist if I were to exist inherently is this. It is decidedly established that anything that exists must exist either as one or numerous. Likewise, if anything does exist truly, it must exist either as truly one or truly numerous. So here, when you talk about the intrinsic or inherent existence, to explore how, if something exists as intrinsically inherently, then what is the mode of true existence? What is the mode of intrinsic existence? So you have to know it so well, and then only by rejecting that you can claim to reject inherent existence. Whereas I say the self to be the self, it does exist inherently. Then which part of the self is which part of the self is the self, and this not being the mode of true existence of the self, even if you reject that part, that none of the parts of the self is the self, even if you reject that part, it does not entail you to understand the rejection of the inherent existence. So now, just as if something does exist, as if something exists, it should either exist as single or multiple, one or numerous. These are the only two options for something to exist. Likewise, if something exists as inherently, then it should exist as inherently one or inherently multiple, inherently numerous. These are the only two options for its existence. So with this in mind, continue reading from page 35, line 5. Likewise, if anything does exist truly, it must exist either as truly one or truly numerous. And that if something does not exist in either way, then it cannot exist truly at all. So this is how we reject true existence, only by rejecting what connotes the true existence. Hence, just as the reasoning of one or numerous, the reason of one of numerous is that this proud is the topic, it is empty of true existence because it is not truly existent one and not truly existent multiple. This is the reasoning. Hence, just as the reasoning of one or numerous leads to determining the lack of true existence, leads to determining the empty of true existence, likewise, one should undertake a probe in such a way that one should be able to decidedly establish that if something were to exist, it must exist in either of the two ways. And then, through pursuing the probe, if one does not find it existing in either way, one should be in a position to decidedly establish its non-existence. If you see that the object does not exist as truly one with its parts, or truly different from its parts, only then you can claim to understand. You can claim to understand that okay, now this object is the empty of true existence. On the other hand, if something is not required to be existing in either of the ways, even if it were to be existing inherently, say if the self were existing inherently, and then it is not necessary, this is not how the self should be existing inherently, that the self should be in any of the parts of the self, or to identify the any of the parts to identify the as self, or inside, outside. This is not how the self exists inherently, and because of that, even if you reject the self to be the findable among any of the parts or within, outside, and so forth, this does not entail the understanding of the emptiness of the true existence of the self. And to continue reading the text. On the other hand, if something is not required to be existing in either of the ways, like the self to be identified inside the body, outside the body, and so forth, even if it were to be existing inherently, then by merely finding its non-existing in those ways, that the self is to be found not existing, empty of being inside, outside, and so forth, and not existing in those ways, one cannot decidedly determine. It does not entail that you determine that the self is empty of the true existence or exists inherently.